Righty, I am going to start. Okay, before we really get started with the last event of the Solutions Summit, we are going to give attendees some time to get in. I see we already have one person that joined us as soon as we started. So we are going to give everybody a little bit of time to get in. I'm going to go over some last minute details with everybody joining us. We just want to say thank you for all of the positive feedback we've had, whether it's through email, messages, in different chats, as well as different sessions. We are truly grateful that you decided to spend some of your day with us today, as well as yesterday. If you happen to miss any of the sessions, most of them are already available on demand, and this lobby will be open for another 30 days. So go back, rewatch the sessions that you loved, watch ones you missed. And at this point, we are really going to kick it off. And we are waiting for another panelist. She will be here shortly. It gives me great pleasure to welcome this incredible group of women with us today to discuss women in green jobs, breaking barriers. We've had a wonderful time getting to know each other and a wonderful rehearsal, and I'm very grateful to have Marianne Grenna Manley on to moderate today. She is the founder and president of 15E Communications, and I'm going to turn this over to you, Marianne.
Well, thanks so much, Jessica, and welcome everyone. I'm so happy that you were able to join today. I want to congratulate Environment and Energy Leader for putting together such a fantastic and engaging solutions summit and extend my gratitude for the honor of moderating this important discussion. And of course, a big thank you to each of our speakers for joining us today. Our topic, women leading the way in green jobs. So when we talk about green jobs, we're broadly including employment opportunities that help preserve or restore the environment, conserve natural resources, and or promote sustainable practices. These jobs can really be in any industry, and they focus on activities that have a positive impact on the environment and contribute to the transition to a more sustainable and low carbon economy. I'm going to give some brief introductions now, but each of the panelists will tell you a little bit more about herself as we get into the conversation. So first we have Paula Glover, president of the Alliance to Save Energy. We're also joined by Dr. Amy Nagengast, energy program manager for San Francisco International Airport. Joanne Rodriguez, co-founder and CEO of Mycocycle. And hopefully joining us very soon will be Elizabeth Spears, the co-founder and chief product officer of Plainsight. Collectively, these women leaders embody the spirit of innovation, resilience, and dedication that's necessary to bring about transformative change in the environmental and energy space. Through their groundbreaking work, they are shaping the future and providing inspiration for the next generation of women leaders. During our conversation today, we'll have the opportunity to hear their stories and explore the importance of women's leadership. Their experiences and achievements will provide valuable insights into the challenges they've overcome, the opportunities they've created, and the impact they have in shaping a more sustainable world while driving economic growth and equity. So we're going to jump right in. I'm going to start with you, Joanne. So could you tell us a little bit about your background, your company, and what inspired you to pursue your current career path?
Sure. Thank you so much, and happy to be here. Joanne Rodriguez, the founder and CEO of Mycocycle. So Mycocycle is a process that transforms waste to valuable bio-based raw materials using mushrooms. So I affectionately say we train mushrooms to eat trash and create new materials. It's very nature inspired and exists to really remove waste from the construction supply chain. The reason I'm doing that is I spent roughly 30 years in construction products and material manufacturing. I'm a former director of sustainability, and I was acutely aware of the issues of waste that our industry had. Also co-chaired green chemistry interdivisionally, and knew what type of chemicals were going into the products. So I guess I always call it my midlife career pivot, maybe not a crisis, it's working out so far, but I decided to leave corporate in 2017, in part because it was very male dominated. I did not see my path forward. I wasn't feeling fulfilled. So I went into environmental consulting. I took a course in permaculture design from Oregon State University to hone my skills. And I learned about fungi and the power of mushroom to clean heavy hydrocarbons. And it was a light bulb moment for me. So I launched Mycocycle in end of 2018, basically to protect IP, and then really put the company out there in 2020 through the National Renewable Energy Labs. And we've been growing ever since we started, created 10 new jobs, doubled our footprint, just successfully closed a seed round of investment. And we're looking at this future path of growth with as a new raw material supplier with a low carbon bio-based solution from waste.
That's a great beginning of the story for everybody today. You said that you left your previous profession because of not really seeing a path forward. So can you talk a little bit more about what some of the biggest challenges for women that you've seen generally and for you personally, and what have been some of the successful strategies that you've used to overcome some of the challenges you've seen and faced?
I always go to the P word, the passion. I feel like women get tagged with passion if they're in environmental sector, if you're a subject matter expert in sustainability, resilience, circularity. You don't hear the P word getting used with men, the passion. It's always equated more to a revenue. So I think some of the challenges will always come in how women communicate around the impact of this. But just statistically speaking, the World Bank put out a study back in November of 2022. Women continue to be undervalued, underpaid, and really not considered as part of the workforce. The labor force is made up of roughly 50% women, 80% men. The pandemic set us behind, so it'll be 132 years before there's parity and equality for women, but it gets a little bit worse even in the green jobs coming out of the Paris Accord. Women were only making up roughly 32% of any of the energy positions out there, less than 26% of the water-led positions. They're largely not seen as part of this green economy. In fact, only 64 women to every 100 men are considered to be green talent. And so that just kind of sets the mark for everything we're trying to do. If you don't have women in leadership, if we look at only 15% of women making up board positions and 4% of women leading as CEOs, the decisions are being made by men, and you typically pick the same teams. So I think leaving corporate, I encourage people to, look at their dynamic and see how that they can carve out their seat at the table, create the opportunities of the future. I have 2 daughters. I want to show them the way. I'm very mindful about how we do this, and I look to allies, and that's some of what kind of transformed my path. Some of the positive nature for me. It's very hard to raise money in this sector. Less than 2% of women get venture capital. If you put a male in the room, though, it jumps to 17%. If you're a founder of color, it's worse. And so some of the opportunities for me were finding allies. My lead investor is a social impact investor out of the Bay Area. He looked past and any of the gender issues and even some of the bias I started to impart to myself. And I have some great coaches and mentors. I've just tried to find the resources that would empower me, kind of get over those biases, real or implied, and just kind of own this process. And that has been fundamentally the key to my success today.
Well, that's a lot of challenges you overcame. And Paula, I saw you kind of nodding here and there. I want to just give either you or Amy a moment to add on to anything that resonated with you with what Joanne might have just kind of covered in her opening remarks.
Yeah, no, I was really just agreeing with everything that Joanne was saying because it sounded so familiar, unfortunately. So
Right.
Just amplifying it.
Yeah. Well, I like, Joanne, that you talked about some of your allies and finding some champions to help you along. Was there anyone in particular or something in particular that really has surprised you along the way that has made a big impact on you or the field more generally?
Yeah, I mean, I think what gives me hope is the amount of support. So there are organizations like Get Cities that emanates from the Melinda Gates Foundation, from Pivotal Ventures. They're situated in major metropolitan areas. I joined their inaugural cohort here in Chicago. It really helped me. It really helped me to be in the room with other female founders and BIPOC founders and kind of just understand you're not alone. To see the conveners that come around that, to see other opportunities like Stella Women Ventures. Dr. Sylvia Ma is a great champion of women in STEM, leading one of the largest angel investment organizations, as well as putting forward Get to Even boot camp, so women can even the strategies for raising portfolio. There's so many Latinas in tech, and I can share these resources in the chat, but I just think coming together and realizing you're not alone, that there are other people in the room, and having that dialogue and seeing the amount of just male participation in this. They know that our economy is better when women are in leadership, and I think just not caving to these pressures to operate as business as normal. One of our first independent board directors is a female. Right. I want to show the path. I'm really committed to representation organizationally. And I think we have to continue to kind of stand our guard and get that support. And really the biggest surprise to me has been our investors. I have a cap table that's 45% made up of female and underrepresented founders and investors. So people of color, trans, like we run the gamut. I'm proud of that 45%. I want to see it be more in our future rounds because I want to reward good behavior, and there's a lot of reciprocity. We learn a lot from having diversity at our table. But it's that 55% that continues to really amplify and support me as a female founder in mushroom tech, right? If you can imagine being a solo first time female peddling mushrooms that eat trash, you need a lot of help. And so being able to see that is just kind of, I never need encouragement to talk about this, but it does encourage me to step up and step out and try to lead by example. And say it's okay to look different. It's okay to sound different. You tell your story and own it with dignity and with confirmation and affirmation. And those resources will tend to build around you and lift you up.
Thank you, Joanne. Those are such great points. And we'll be talking, throughout the conversation more about collaboration and mentorship and resources and how women obviously can support other women. It's been great hearing. I love the thought of mushroom tech. I've never really quite thought about that before. And I see that Elizabeth Spears has joined us. Hi, Elizabeth. We've jumped in here, and I made your introduction in the opening, but we're glad to see your face, and thanks for joining the conversation today. So I think we're going to switch for a little bit over to Amy. When we were prepping for this session, actually, some conversations transpired that sort of shaped what we're going to talk to Amy about. She was sharing a lot about what it was like to be in a sector that was traditionally male, and some of the strides that she's personally made, and some really astute observations about things that really need to happen in that kind of space where it's traditionally men. So Amy, I'd like you to now talk a little bit about your career path, your current role, and how did you fall into what we're broadly defining as the environmental sector in a male-dominated field?
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Marianne. And I'm really honored to be on this panel. So maybe stepping all the way back, I was born into the skilled trades industry and culture. My dad ran a small business out of our garage. So my whole life has been in construction and in that spirit. But interestingly enough, I'd never heard of the word engineering until I was a junior in high school, which thinking back is wild. And I only got exposed to it because of one of my parents' friend of a friend who at that time had a take your daughter to work day. I think it's now take your daughter kid to work day or maybe something like that. But I got asked to go participate. And so for me, I got to spend an afternoon. At that time, I lived in Minnesota. And so I got to go down to the big city and go in the tallest skyscraper I'd both ever seen or been in, and went up to a civil engineering office. And there were, women and men that showed us around, but they talked about what engineering is. And more importantly, I guess for me, I'm a huge sports enthusiast. So these so happened like they were an engineering firm that helped design sports stadiums. So they had little mini models of sports stadiums all around. I was like, wow, that is a job I didn't know existed. And that nugget and that exposure, propelled me through an undergrad in civil and environmental engineering, through all of the hurdles that went through there, into my first job, which I didn't wind up becoming a sports stadium designer, but actually certainly a pivot, and found myself on water and wastewater treatment plants. So typically things that most people don't think of, but that was myself on a water and wastewater treatment plant with certainly all men. Really everything you can think of. If you get a chance to go visit or tour one of those, I would strongly recommend it. It is both fascinating. But working there, for me, like sustainability, green jobs, none of that was kind of part of my ethos. But what I realized is certainly helping and supporting and working there is roughly 30% of our operating budget went to energy to be able to treat water and to move wastewater. And I was like, wow, there's so much recovery and resource recovery that goes into water, wastewater, and energy. Like, I'm very interested in the energy space. So big pivot there, lots of grad school and doctorate in the energy management space. And fast forward 20 years, a bunch of engineering consulting and construction work. I have been at the San Francisco airport for 3.5 years now. And so I'm the first energy program manager, which, people are like, what is that? And is that like a new job you just made up? What's your background? So, realistically, I am an engineer. That is what I present myself with, but certainly a non-traditional engineer. I work absolutely across our engineering departments, our huge skilled trades here, all of our operations staff to get big initiatives done. In short, what am I responsible for? I'm responsible for generating electricity, storing it, and using it effectively in all of our buildings and our transportation systems. So if you come and fly through the San Francisco airport, you've got our terminals and you've got the huge campus that surrounds it. I'm back there supporting it's making sure that it's the most energy efficient it can be. So lots of projects under that purview, but two maybe of note and currently a big focus area of maybe the green environmental movement is building and fleet electrification, which I certainly drive forward. So that's a little bit of me, and I'll pause there.
Oh, that's awesome. And now I have a face I can put with the San Francisco airport when I go through. I'll think of you, Amy. So one of the things, obviously, that is a theme in what we're talking about are some of the roadblocks for women in general, but particularly in a field that's male dominated. So could you share a little bit more of your insight on what you've observed, what you've seen as some of the challenges and women moving forward in those sorts of jobs, and maybe just a little bit about the culture and what you think can improve to make things a little bit more progressive, people in those positions moving forward a little more quickly?
Yeah, so to build on Joanne's, starting everything with statistics and really kind of a ground setting, the foundations of what people know, and maybe they do know about engineering, and in terms of the undergrads in the US, 1 out of 5 are women that graduate across our universities. So it's 20% roughly. The interesting thing to me is I've certainly been out of school for 20-ish years, And that hasn't really moved much. It's roughly moved about 4% in the last 20 years. So certainly there's been a lot of work in curriculum development in trying to engage women and mentor them throughout the difficult engineering path that is an undergrad. But there's still a lot of work to do there, just kind of stopping. But then, once you get a degree, what do you do after that? There's actually a fair bit. The US Census just brought out some new data that people are certainly choosing different careers than engineering, which is also a problem when we need more engineers and other folks in that profession. So, that is 17% generally, but when we're thinking about electrification and all the great work that I do, mechanical and electrical engineers traditionally are ones that fit in that space, and those are 9 to 10% females who work currently in that space. So it's pretty small in the whole grand scheme of things. At the airport, proud to present, we're 44%, so it's a great place for women in growth, and we can talk about there as we get there. But I do also absolutely need to talk about the skilled trades. So skilled trades have an absolute apprenticeship program, so their curriculum development as well, and then their movement into the trades. In terms of women in that arena, 4%, right? It is very small across all 18% on average, all 18 different trades on average, it's 4. And it's no different at the airport. So the airport, it's 4%, even though on the engineering side, we have significantly more percentage of women. So I think maybe, starting with the stats and then moving to what are those potential roadblocks, certainly the curriculum and the path to even get kind of your foot in the door to get that high paying and stable job in this industry that really makes an impact. But then there's that culture piece, right? Do you fit here? Do you see yourself here? What is all the wrapper that surrounds why you want to dedicate your life to, working at the airport or other big owners, or just generally in this space? So there is a lot more work, certainly as we kind of look towards the future for green jobs, and certainly what I do, that we need a lot more of all of those different people. So that culture is a huge challenge. Certainly on the engineering front, there's industry trade associations from the Society of Engineers. We're absolutely in the trades, the California Tradeswomen, Washington Women in the Trades Association, to lift two up, but there are lots of others that are trying to certainly change that culture, but we can also always do more.
Thanks, Amy. And we'll pull some of these resources together too after we wrap up today, make those available to attendees. So that's a lot of challenges, but in addition to some of the networks and those sorts of opportunities for women to get involved in to help advance their careers, have you seen anything in particular, or can you think of any best practices that in the workplace really can make a difference for providing, within an organization, what are some best practices to get these opportunities more available to women, or to get them the skills advancement training that they would need to even move up in a more apprentice-like kind of job?
Yeah, and I think, just starting with an entry-level person or position, everybody can do something. And so for me, I think everybody can certainly prop up when and whenever possible. And this means quoting their work, mentioning them by name as subject matter experts. Not, I just got this idea. No, give the credit where it's due and talk about who that was and where it come from. Certainly introducing them to people and opportunities, pointing to their prior work and presentations, pulling them forward into projects, or something we can all do. But, naming them and giving their credit, I think, is absolutely huge. Here at the airport, we do have employee resource groups. We are a big organization for sure. So there is absolutely one dedicated to women. And then we also do various focus months. So we did have a Women's History Month in April, and we focused all on our trades. So happy to provide our LinkedIn videos, but we really lifted up our women in the trades and had short videos to talk about what they do and how it's like to work here, for example. As managers, absolutely hire them, pay them well, teach them to negotiate, and ask questions. And I think another one is certainly airport and maybe other organizations, give them the lay of the land politically. How does this work, and who are the players? What are those kind of unwritten rules that don't necessarily make it into the handbooks for sure? As owners, so at the airport, we are owners. We absolutely come out with big requests for proposals. And, we require on our contracts partnerships with local and minority owned business owners. So women and people of color absolutely need to be on all of our contracts. So that certainly is something like we are pushing and doing forward. I think also, certainly for me, as I had started, we do a lot of field trips. I'm very passionate about that. Elementary school, middle school. Yes. I mean, maybe when they come to the airport, maybe they see some of the things that we do around here that will spark them, whether it's the aviation industry, which has we have a lot to do on the environmental front, or maybe they pivot to something else, but they get to see it. As a visual person, it's huge. Absolutely, interns and co-ops. I have two at the moment that are here for various stints of time and various allotments from high school to college and out. So I do think, a whole suite of things helps to move and expose people to various elements of the culture and what it could be and could look like.
Those are tremendous efforts. I love hearing about all of those. I wanted to just for a moment open it up to anybody else who wanted to comment generally on anything Amy said, or add to your, the thoughts on some of the things she's talked about here.
I did. One of the things that was an impetus for me was somebody believing in me. I attended Clinton Global Initiative meetings for years as a subject matter expert in the building sector. One of those meetings, the program manager, Fernando Arias, I'm still friends with him. He tapped me to represent women in underrepresented industries. So I was the designate for the construction industry. And little did I know at the time it would be the kickoff to the No Ceilings initiative for Hillary Clinton, who happened to come in the room. And I was like, dumbfounded. But in that, it was just somebody having confidence in my voice and being on a panel with the energy industry, with, the logistics industry, all led by female CEOs. I said at that time, the next time I sat at one of those panels, I'd be the CEO of my own company. And so I do very much feel what Amy's saying in terms of carving out and making sure people can see you, that you're saying the names of who is enabling this, where these great ideas are coming from, and continuing to propel others forward.
Thanks, Joanne. Paula, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Yeah, I just wanted to add a couple of thoughts about what Amy was talking about it when you talk about showing people the lay of the land in an organization, and just kind of highlighting for people the importance of having emotional intelligence. In this industry, we talk a lot about people having technical skills and abilities, which you absolutely need. But if you do not have emotional intelligence, you suffer. And so people can't always tell you what the right path is, or who's in charge, or where the centers of influence are. There's a lot of that we have to do ourselves in navigating in organizations. And that really requires us being really present and paying a different emotional, paying attention emotionally, right? Because as women, we are very intuitive. And so we can't leave that to the side. You actually have to be paying really deep attention to the things that are going on around you, what people say, how people work, how people coalesce around individuals. All of that stuff is actually really strong clues for leadership paths. And so I would just, want to add that.
It's funny you mentioned that, because as you were saying it, I remember when I was working at Bloomberg, I had such a different management style than some of my male counterparts, because I managed my team very much as individuals, right? Because they all needed something different. They all responded in a different way. And I think that is one thing that women, you mentioned intuition, but I think that really reading people and seeing, not that men can't do this, and some men I'm sure do this, but I think you see more often that women are more able to quickly pick up on some of the signals that, will help people when they need some help, and just kind of help them go along their path. So thanks for bringing that up. That was a great exchange there. We're going to shift over to you now, Elizabeth. welcome. Good to see you today.
Thank you. I figured out Zoom. Too many Zoom accounts. But
well, I tell you, it
happens,
right? And well, we're just thrilled that you're here. And I've been giving everybody a little bit of an opportunity before they start, getting more engaged in the questions, to talk a little bit about your background, a bit about your company, and in your case, your role in creating and leading in green tech innovation.
Sure. So I am the co-founder and chief product officer at Plainsight, and we are one of the most well-known AI companies specializing in enterprise computer vision software. It's niche, but that's where we are. My background is I graduated from UCLA with in cognitive science. So it was basically half computer science, half human computer interaction and psychology. And I have my background's in a variety of high-tech software development, so including early machine learning, big data analytics, IoT, and now AI. I typically work in earlier stage companies, and I've spent most of my career going from kind of zero to something big. That's kind of where I am, as the masochistic early stage. So in general, I'm really passionate about delivering vision AI solutions to positively impact our kind of global climate and help large organizations exceed their sustainability goals. Vision AI is one of these places that isn't always directly connected as a solution, and I'll go through kind of several examples of where it can really help in green tech. So I'll do that.
Sure.
So I'll
go right ahead.
Yeah, right, going right along. So I'll kind of start with what is computer vision. So essentially what it is you can point a camera on anything, and we can build a AI model to recognize what's going on. So tracking things, monitoring things, etc. And so this can sometimes get a bad reputation of like tracking people and that type of thing, but we actually have no use cases where we're tracking people. So we're in many enterprise companies. We do a lot in agriculture, and so the way computer vision can be applied across green tech, for one of the most prevalent ways is for better monitoring of what could be waste or emissions or leaks or kind of unintended environmental impacts. So one company that we work with has a solution where they are working in kind of the blue economy, and they have technology that enables they have an energy system for it allows marine energy systems like tidal turbines and wave energy converters to be deployed into the environment. And so our role in that is we do continuous monitoring of that solution so that we ensure that it coexists harmoniously with aquatic life. So what that means is we're making sure that it's generally fish. All of the fish around it are safe, that there are normal numbers, that the changes in kind of the seasons, it is all tracking normally. So basically, when you put something into the water to generate energy, you aren't creating a negative environmental impact. So that's kind of one area. Another one is we're working with one of the world's leading agriculture companies to understand pest population and plant disease spread. So this is traditionally a really tedious task for scientists to go out into the field and individually count what can be, hundreds to thousands of pests on leaves that are very small and categorize their growth stage, right? So pupa, adult, things like that. And so what we've been able to do is have a solution where you just take a picture of that, it automatically counts all of it. And so what that means is that they have a much more accurate way to understand pest outbreaks. Now that same type of solution can be applied in forestry as well. So there's a lot of fungus and other types of pests that are kind of wreaking havoc on our forests. And so this kind of thing can track that in a much faster and more accurate way. So you can understand the stages of outbreaks.
That's like so fascinating.
Yeah, it's kind
seriously,
of
like the technology is just incredible.
And it's things that you wouldn't really expect across many industries, right? So it's like you say, you point a camera at something and you can train an AI model. How, how does that help me? But then the last one I'll give an example for is in quick service restaurants. So we're working with a very large company that has they have their inventory, right? And so one of the things is that inventory tracking in QSRs is actually incredibly inaccurate for several different reasons. And so we're able to put a camera on that, and just by knowing the state of your produce, how much of it you have, when you maybe need to reorder, being able to track those things can really significantly cut down on food waste. And we all know kind of the issue with how much food waste is in our landfills and the amount of methane that produces, and et cetera, et cetera. So those are just kind of a few examples of some of the things we're working on in the green tech space. Super cool, cutting edge. Learned a lot in those last 5 minutes, so thank you. And obviously the other part of on the other side of the tech is just you, right? So I'd like to hear a little bit more about, some of what you found along the way for your inspiration and support as a woman creating establishing a new business and technology, and kind of related, because you have your eye on AI. Do you see ways that kind of technology can actually support, moving women ahead in the workplace? Yeah, I think we have this opportunity to measure more types of bias than we ever have before. And I'll give an example. So when Facebook made an AI model to help with hiring decisions, it was in one way a complete disaster, because it clearly recommended male candidates over female candidates. In another way, it was nothing short of enlightening, right? So this AI model learned from their historical hiring data. So what it clearly presented was how biased decisions were being made. So even things like extracurriculars that were more traditionally male could predict a hiring decision. So while the press and we often can focus on the problem that AI presents because it can, sort of deliver this type of answer, there is fortunately also a flip side to that, which is this type of AI introspection. So if an organization is dedicated to understanding and mitigating bias across, these different types of decisions, the AI can actually help uncover them and make it more clear what sort of those higher level intelligence decisions that's coming out of your historical data can tell you. That's just fascinating. Did anybody else want to jump in on this about the bias issue? I think this came up in our conversations. We'll be talking about it a little bit more going in, but I just want to pause for a minute in case anybody else wants to chat.
I just want to, this kind of ties together, where I started with bias, whether we impart it on ourselves or whether it's coming from an externality. And I think this speaks directly to what Amy was saying about the 20% of women entering into the engineering workspace, or even having a workforce of the future that is female. And I think there's just a lot of bias presence, or there's maybe even foundationally what we believe, our internalization of these male-dominated fields that tend to prohibit women from pursuing those paths. And so it's encouraging to hear, that Elizabeth has a tool that can maybe start to chart and monitor what those biases look like, how we even change our language around it, even down to the fact of how do we write a position description to hire. How do we promote internally? What's the communication we put forward organizationally? If we tend to mirror what was already out there, a lot of it will have the implied biases in there. And so trying to break that cycle to make it, to remove any gender bias at all, I think is foundationally important. So it was very good to hear that is part of your technology. I didn't understand all the other words that you said, but I am completely in and, about talking about AI and
Joanne's all in.
So I'm like there. So
yeah, and that's just kind of, it's not necessarily computer vision specifically, no. But that's something that AI models can do, right? And so we have, there's a very big moment in AI right now with large language models and kind of these higher level types of insights that we can pull out of data that we haven't traditionally been able to. And so if we are really dedicated and apply that in the right way, again, it brings up these insights that we may not have, we may not have thought to ask of ourselves or of others. I was thinking about this when Amy was talking about, more women in STEM. And in addition to that, I think it's interesting to think about evening out some of the more traditionally female roles, even in tech companies. From a compensation perspective. So something that we have tried to do internally is, I think it's really arbitrary that, marketing, which is, a more traditionally female role within a company, often is just typically paid, a fourth of an entry-level engineer, right? And in no way is that role impacting our company less, than that person, right? And so that's, I think, another area that we can really think about and kind of take a step back on is, also elevating salaries for roles that are more traditionally female, and should there be a re-leveling there based on their impact to a company.
Definitely a very, very important point. So thanks for bringing that up. All right, Paula, you're back on screen. Your computer's plugged in. You're ready to roll.
I'm ready to roll.
Well, excellent. So I'm going to give you your turn to tell us a little bit about your career path, and how also, while you're telling your story, a little bit about how you've seen the sustainability and energy management industry changing since you started your career.
Yeah, sure. So thank you. Thank you for the invitation. I think unlike the other panelists, haven't spent most of my career in energy management or sustainability, but I have spent my entire career in energy. And I actually started my career 30 plus years ago, just taking payments from customers for a utility company after I got out of school. And I would challenge everybody to say it's the most informed, it's absolutely the best job I ever had. But quite frankly, for us to do the work that we're doing, it's also really informative to understand how everyday customers experience the energy system, what it really feels like for people to have to pay a bill that they may or may not be able to afford. And so for me, that was actually what kept me in the business, was just understanding that interaction, in addition to the fact that, and the data proves it out, that African Americans and people of color have a very different relationship with the energy system than other people. And it does not matter what our income docile is, we tend to pay more. We spend more on our bills than other audiences. And so those two factors were the things that made this business of interest to me, in addition to kind of like finding my people and the people that I wanted to work with and enjoy being around and that I learned from it, and all those other things that, I hope people get if you're going to have a fulfilling kind of work life.
Yeah, definitely. One of the things I've written down is the workforce of the future, right? So leveling out some of these positions that are traditionally male, but even within female roles of continuing to make sure that they're fair, equitable, leveled. One of the things I wanted to ask you, Paula, is what have been some of the tips that you've seen? I think we again talked about this in our planning. What are some of the things that you recommend or that you've seen work for attracting a more diverse work pool just generally? And obviously women specifically, but we talked a little bit here already about unconscious bias and all of these things and through what are your job requirements, et cetera. So can you expand on that a little bit based on your experience?
Yeah, sure. And certainly in the organization that I'm leading, we've been on our own diversity path from when I started 2.5 years ago to where we are now. And one of the things that I think I learned was that, we all have our own biases in the way that we hire, in the way that we write out our job descriptions. And I might suggest starting with our job descriptions is probably the first place that we really eliminate most of the population. From very few words, which is must have experience in energy doing whatever. And so when we hired at the Alliance, initially we have that in our job descriptions. And then we start to ask ourselves some really important questions, which was, if I want a diverse workforce and I want a diverse hiring slate, and I know that my industry is, I think, 6% African-American, then if I'm saying that the person has to have come out of my industry, I've already made a decision that there's a very limited pool of people that I can pull from.
Right.
And so it is about shifting the way that, what are the skills that we need versus what are the experiences that people need to have? And is it a need to have or a nice to have? Is it something that the other person did and so you'd like to continue it on? Or is it something that you really need to have? I think that's one of the first things that we've done. And the minute that we started asking ourselves those kinds of questions, our hiring slates got much broader. And then the second thing is, for us in the interview process, again, what are the biases and the assumptions that we make about people and culture when they show up for an interview? Particularly, it can be a Zoom interview, it can be face-to-face, but we live in a global society. And quite frankly, we have to kind of get over those kinds of expectations of how we want people to show up. I want you to be professional, absolutely, right? I may need you to be an excellent writer. But there's some other things, like maybe I'd like you to be assertive, but if you're quiet, is that really a problem? Or is that something that we can adjust to? And so it is our ability, right, to think about what are those attributes that are super important, and what are those attributes that are our own personal hangups, because that's just how we expect people to be. Because when you do that, look, we have a very westernized way of thinking about the world and about how things should come, and a very Americanized way of thinking about how things should be done. And so when someone shows up and they're not in that kind of box that we've created, there's a real tendency to say, oh, well, they're not going to be able to do it because, and you can come up with a myriad of reasons, which is really not the truth. It's that they showed up differently than what we expected based on our own kind of culture and how we want people to be. And so those were kind of the things that we learned at the Alliance, and we, broke those barriers down. And I think anyone who would look at my website would tell you that I have an incredibly diverse team of people who are really talented, and most who did not come out of the energy industry, and yet all of them who are high performers. And so the shift really does work.
That's fantastic. I like that you worked in our breaking down barriers, because you certainly did. I mean, that's a great success story, frankly. Sticking with the theme a little bit of, doing things or trying to get out of mindset of just doing things how we've always done them. We talked also a little bit in planning for this about COVID and some of the changes that we've seen and challenges that we've encountered because of COVID, during COVID, after COVID. And a lot of those things are connected to social issues in the workplace and work-life balance. So can you talk a little bit about how you see women leading in that area for positive change in work-life balance and making employment maybe a little bit more accessible
Yeah.
for women?
Sure. And I think I'd like to frame it around this idea of being authentic at work and authentic leaders specifically. And because authentic leadership is actually really, really hard. And so, just as a sidebar, for people on the screen who really want to be in a leadership role or want to be a CEO specifically, it's a worthwhile job. It's incredibly fulfilling. I'm lucky to now be able to lead my second organization. It's a lonely role. You're the only person in that role. All that responsibility rolls up to you. And so being authentic is actually really, really valuable because then you're more relatable. And so I'll give you an example. In my previous role when COVID started, we decided to do virtual Zoom calls just as a way of connecting. I had a small team of people who I still love and adore, and we enjoyed being at work together. And we knew after a couple of weeks of being home how much we really missed that. But we had one colleague who had 5 little kids, 5 children at her house who were all under the age of 10. Some were 2 who were babies, homeschooling, the whole thing. And it was probably the 3rd week of us doing this that we all kind of figured out that there was no way that this colleague could join our calls at 10 o'clock in the morning just to kind of, hang out with us because she had all this other stuff going on at her house. And the rest of us, while we all had children, none of us had children at home. And so for me, I could say, wow, I remember when my kids were little and how tortured I would be if I had to be home with them. And so that was the lens at which I started making decisions. What would it have felt like for me as a working mom to have kids that were going to school and all this other stuff? And what could I do to make that better for those employees and colleagues who were going through that during COVID? And so we made things a lot more flexible, and we never went back because people were still productive, right? And what we realized was it really a big deal if so-and-so wasn't at the meeting at 10:30? Not really. You have to have a lot of clarity around what decisions are made about ego. And when I say that, I mean, like, you have to do it because I had to do it, right? Because there's a lot of that exists in work. That we're processes, right? That was the process. You had to do it that way. I had to do it that way. My boss had to do it that way. My boss's boss had to do it that way. Why don't they have to do it that way? Like, that totally exists. But as leaders, what we say is the world is changing. Even though I had to do it, it's nearly impossible for this person to be effective and do it the same exact way. And if what's most important to me is for them being effective, then I can give up the other stuff so that they can do what they need, right? It's this help me, help you, because you're helping me kind of scenario. That makes sense?
Right. Oh, totally makes sense.
Okay.
Absolutely. Great conversation, great discussion. I'm checking the time here. So I think I'm going to ask one more question, and I want to leave some time. I see we have some questions that have come in from the audience as well. But one of the things, again, a theme of our conversations today is the importance of collaboration and networking. So Paul, I'd love to get your thoughts on some of the things that you recommend that have worked for you, that you suggest to others, and then I'll give everybody a chance to kind of give their maybe like top 1 or 2 takeaways on collaboration and networking.
Sure. So I'm in a role where I network all the time. I actually don't particularly like it because I'm an introvert. So I'm not actually a person who likes to be with lots of people who I do not know. But how I've made networking work for me, and I think it's a great tool, is I actually network with people to figure out what I can do for them. I never go in trying to figure out who can help me. Every single person that I meet, I'm typically going to ask, what do you do and how can I support you? How can I help you? Who can I introduce you to? And in that, I get so much more, right? That will be reciprocated at some point down the line. But it goes back to this, like, it's not about me when you're networking. It's not about you. All of us have had the experience of networking and being at an event, handing somebody their business, your card, them looking at it, and you knowing that they're thinking, this person can't help me. And all of a sudden they are completely disinterested in what you have to say. And they're looking for an out to find the person who's more important than you are. We have all experienced that. And so you know, it doesn't, you experience like 5 times is bad enough and you figure out like there's got to be another way. And so what I do is just say like, it's not about me and what I need, it's about what can I provide to somebody else. And then that leads to better collaboration. It just creates a bigger village of people that you are connected to, where you get better ideas and understand the linkages between the work that we do and what other sectors of an industry would do or other industries will do. It just broadens your ability to solve problems that are really complex, but in a really creative way.
Awesome. Anyone else want to give your little tidbit before we go to the questions? I see a couple in here.
I was just going to say, if you're especially in a room of women in leadership in particular, don't be afraid to ask if they're on a board and if they can sponsor you onto a board. You know, when we talk about these statistics and about women in leadership, maybe CEO is not the place you want to be, but you have skills that can serve a board very well. The companies that have women either in leadership that are focused on climate tech or on boards reduce their emissions greater than 5% above all other companies worldwide. Get yourself into that position though. Don't be afraid to ask that question. Like, just like Paul is saying, a reciprocity is important, but I think having a purpose and knowing who will be in the room, I think it's okay to go directly to somebody and say, hey, help me get into a position, or let me help you get into a position. I think it works both ways. And I think we don't always think to ask those questions.
A great point. Amy or Elizabeth, anything you want to add?
I certainly just wanted to lift up Paul's comment of, you know, what has been done in the past doesn't have to be done going forward in the future. In certain ways, it's like, oh, you know, you might need to jump through hoops A, B, and C, but all of them are irrelevant. And why do we need to continue these hoops if the end result is really what we're looking for, right? We're looking for high impact and value professions and what we do, you know, as part of our lives here, and kind of, you know, even thinking like, oh, I made it through all these hoops, therefore like you should do it. And you're like, oh, you know, I do think that's a really great comment to both lift up and have it in the mirror, because I feel like I certainly still have those as for me barriers to be like, yeah, but you need to go through all these steps first, and then even to also start to nudge to break that mold. For me, you know, even when people above me say like you have to go through all these steps, like I think the interesting strategy is how do I help break those, you know, barriers that they've gone through. And my, you know, somewhat effective way to do that is through thoughtful and genuine questions, you know, and I think it's, you know, to pull on Paula's comment of being networking and being interested in the other person is having that genuine curiosity of their experience and like their path through those hoops, and, you know, to really dive in and then ultimately, you know, help them think through like, well, what was actually important? Is this just, you know, part of the process, or is this really the end result that we're looking for? So 2 great comments, Paula, that I think definitely want to lift up.
Great. Elizabeth, if you don't have anything to add, I'm going to jump into the questions I'm seeing here. Joanne, I see one for you. Can you share your experience with testing your product, enzyme cells, in a controlled environment? Did you work with biochemists? Did you partner with a lab? Thank you.
Everything we do, because we have to be 10 times better, is with an external testing force, right? I mean, that's, I just come straightforward. We will do internal testing on sprints, just trying to operate very lean, but we always go to external tests. And manufacturers we work with their R&D labs to allow them to own the data sets, so I don't have to tell them. You know, they can see it for themselves. So yeah, that's a very important part of what we do. It's a good question. But I just highly recommend, you know, getting the external test to begin with, because it's going to happen again, right? If you test it internally and say, trust me, people are going to say no, like, because that 10 times factor. So.
Great. Thank you. This I think is a good one we are really running out of time, but, I'm going to open it up to everybody. What advice can you give to young women pursuing a career in the sustainability field? Who wants to start?
So I'll start by just saying, remember that you're pursuing a career, which means there's a runway and it doesn't happen immediately and it's not going to be easy. And, you know, as Amy said, you are likely to jump through some hoops. You're probably going to be aggravated. But if you're pursuing something that you really want, it's not intended to be easy. It's supposed to be hard. And by the way, this is work. It's labor. It's definitely supposed to be hard, but it's also worthwhile. And so I would just say, like, stick to it. We're all here. Certainly for me, I have a LinkedIn. If anybody connects with me with LinkedIn and says, hey, do you want to chat? I got about a 95% rating of, like, I will talk to anybody who reaches out to me if they're interested, just because that's who I am and because people did that for me. And so I would absolutely suggest for young women that they should do that with every person that they meet. Can I keep in touch with you? I'd love to chat with you about what I'm thinking about or what you're working on, because we want to share what we're doing. And we do want to encourage you, but I think you'll meet a lot of executives who will tell you that we get disappointed when young people don't reach out to us and follow up. And so please, please, please do that.
I think for me also elevating, for young people starting this career, I think they might have perspectives of what certain job roles are and to really challenge those because they are evolving both with technology and both with interdisciplinary natures of the complex problems that we're working on. So while a traditional role might have been one thing and what they think, it has evolved and is evolving, and they can be part of that shift. So certainly what those biases might be for an engineer or a trade or anything on kind of that front, like those have really evolved and they need to continue to evolve, and they do need to. So just certainly reflecting back on what they might think a profession is, and certainly happy to always talk with people about what my experience in, whether it's trades and engineering, kind of in this new space. My job never existed before. It was made up. And now it's one of those, like, other airports, we have about 10 of us now because they're like, what did you do? What did you do? Oh, that's a hole that needed to be filled. And so, this is also morphing to be a bigger area and didn't exist before. So jobs are evolving.
Definitely. Elizabeth, anything to add?
No, that just kind of made me think. I made up a job once early in my career, and I think I 100% agree with what Paula and Amy were saying. I think especially early on, really thinking about that emotional intelligence and understanding the lay of the land before jumping on being, on really trying to do something huge, right? And not to say don't try to do something huge, but make sure that the way to achieve that goal that's going to work within an organization, right? And some of those things can be really hard lessons to learn early on, because it's just a new environment, right? Like typically in school, you got to just do whatever you wanted to do and solve the problem and propose a new idea. And so I think just understanding, making sure to observe first, really put together clear and understandable arguments, find people within the organization that can talk to you about, what you're working on and what they're working on, and use that, sort of start to build that friendly, not networking for the, a larger purpose, just sort of the friendly people within you and kind of build up your team that way. So anyway,
absolutely
agreeing with the others. Yeah,
that's so cool. And Joanne, last word to you before I turn it back over to Jessica. Anything you want to add?
I mean,
any words of wisdom here?
I'm all about job creation. I mean, just ditto on everything. I absolutely agree. And I just think just be informed, but don't be afraid to be passionate. I think, we try to scrub those emotions out, and I think the emotions are what make us the superior being, to be quite honest. So like, own that, but always remember that 10 times rule. Every woman here has to be 10 times better in what they do, and then just arm yourself. You've got the skills, they're in you. So if you follow that purpose and passion, you're going to do great. along with all the other amazing bits of advice. There's nothing bad here to take forward.
Absolutely. Thank you all so much. This has been an incredible conversation. I wish we could keep going. There'll be a chance, I think, for people to continue asking questions afterwards, right, Jessica? So yes. I'll turn it back to you. Thank you all so much.
Well, I just want to say how much I enjoyed listening to the entire conversation. And I'm going to second what Marianne said. And it'd be great if we could stay on even longer. And hopefully this is not the last time that all of us will get together and have conversations like this, because it's something that we need to definitely talk about more and bring to the forefront. So I couldn't think of a better way to end our Solution Summit. So Amy, Marianne, Joanne, Paula, and Elizabeth, thank you so much for closing up today's event. And I wish you all well, and hopefully we will get to meet in person sooner than later. A fantastic conversation. And at this point, we've concluded the Solution Summit, but all sessions are available to watch on demand for the next 30 days. Just come back and visit, and we look forward to hearing feedback from everybody. Have a wonderful day.